Hello, hello, Source Gamers. It's me, A Shadow Link. I'm forever your host. Welcome to today's Good Morning Source Gaming. I'm just gonna put Nan on. Hello,
Hello.
hello. We're doing this. Welcome to
Two-man band today.
Yeah. Welcome to Good Morning Source Gaming, everyone.
Yep.
Today we're going to be talking about a lot of things.
It's been quite a week this week. For
Ah,
all three of the big players in the console gaming market, it seems.
Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with this.
Well, we should begin where we always begin and talk about what we've been doing first.
All right, get
Forget
ready for the
about all
next
them. Let's
hour.
talk about us. Well, with just the two of us, it might actually go. It might actually be an introduction for once.
I don't know, man. The last time I played a Yakuza game, I took up the entire podcast.
We'll keep thoughts on that shorter and sweeter this time. Then
I don't
I'm
want to
guessing...
spoil it for anyone in the
Yeah.
audience, so I'm just going to talk about like general impressions on Infinite Wealth, and I ask the people who may have been playing it alongside me, who might be in chat today, to also not spoil the game, please.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find my funny window where it says what song is playing right now. It's not in my source list. 1 second. There it is.
Oopsie.
Found it. I'm gonna just put this in the bottom right so everybody knows what's going on. Make sure the chat box is working.
Yeah, make sure chat box is on as well. Well, I guess. Well, shall I start? Shall I start with the games I'm playing first? Then.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So there's two main games. Technically three. I did start Mario vs Donkey Kong. I've not finished it yet, but it's like I think I played it for like 30 minutes and got through all three of the first world, like the first three entire worlds, which is like a bit fast. I don't actually remember how many worlds there are in this game. I know they added a few more, but that's pretty quick. I do feel very nostalgic for it though. Like the music in particular, giving me flashbacks to 2004. But we'll see how that goes. The main games I'm playing right now are Persona 3 Reload and RZ. RZ I started today. And that one was that for some bizarre reason. When I first started it up on the Steam Deck, it just wouldn't play cutscenes.
Oh, that's
like
normal.
Half the charm.
That's normal for Steam Deck. Video files, if they're not in a format that the Linux core accepts, just don't play.
Well, this is the thing that makes it weird. So we have two accounts on our Steam Deck. My housemate's because it's his Steam Deck, and then my account because he lets me use it. And on his account, RZ works perfectly fine. There are no issues with anything. But if I log into my account and play it, it just doesn't play any cutscenes instead.
Do Steam Deck users have some kind of compatibility issues?
I don't know. I mean, so I ended up solving the problem by having to download this extra Proton code, like this custom-made one through GitHub, and like installing that onto the Steam Deck, and that now it works fine. But it was like super bizarre that it just wouldn't work naturally for me specifically, but works for my friend without any hitch. Weird, but yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I've only played a little bit of that, like an hour of that one so far, because I only started it this morning because I couldn't be bothered to play more Persona today, because I didn't really want to read much today. I wasn't in the mood for it. But yeah, RZ is it's quite a lot of fun. It's got that lovely CDI charm to it. That
boy.
people enjoy. This is the nice way of putting it. But it doesn't feel janky at all. It's clearly like a current game with the CDI skin over the top of it. Although there's a weird case of like you have a lot of the art, the cutscene arts. That's obviously like 2D drawn over the top animations replicating that. But then you get a couple of like weird 3D rotoscoped cutscenes. That are, like, very noticeably 3D rotoscoped.
What?
They just happen at like every time you hit like one of these towers where it's meant to like so your goal at the start is to hit these 4 towers and that unlocks more of the world to explore. But every time you hit it, the cutscene where she hits it is very clearly 3D rotoscoped. And the first cutscene you get after hitting the first one is like you go back to see the king and some of the other characters, and everything is 3D rotoscoped, and it's incredibly noticeable. And it's like the only time it does it, like the next time you get a cutscene like this, it's back to being the 2D art. And I have no idea why it's like that. It's weird.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I thought they were just gonna like purely do the CDI aesthetic, but if they're throwing in some oddities, uh,
Mhm.
that's
It's
actually extremely interesting.
yeah, but
Yeah, it is most certainly part of the joke, but like,
mhm.
I didn't expect it to deviate from what it is apparently.
Mhm.
That's extremely interesting.
Yeah. And I'm having a good time with the game, but I've only played like an hour of it. Persona 3 Reload I've played much more. So I initially played Persona 3 Portable last year when it came to Switch, and I got like to the end of August, I think, and decided I just didn't like it. The story wasn't really going anywhere. The format of Persona 3 Portable wasn't particularly great. Trying to do social links and stuff was like super strict and taxing. I just didn't enjoy Portable. I'm having a much better time with Reload, however. I'm not as far as I got to, so we'll see if my opinion shifts if I get to August. Like I've only done the first chapter, quote unquote, the
Mm.
monorail train battle, and then jumped back into Tartarus, and I'm nearly at the up to the furthest I can get in
Did you
Tartarus again.
play the original at all?
No, so but I started with Persona 4.
I see.
So I went Persona 4, Persona 5, and then 3 Portable, and then gave up on that, and I'm now trying 3 Reload.
Yeah, fellow staffer Creeks is a big fan of Persona 3.
Mm-hmm.
And he hated Reload before it came out. He thought it was a betrayal and a change to the style that he did not like.
Mm-hmm.
And last I heard, uh, that is no longer the case because he's a little fucking tsundere. And I'm calling you out in public on this.
Atlas, you backer. See, because I started with 4, and then when I played 3 Portable, one of my biggest problems with it is it just felt really archaic to me.
Mm,
Like, I could see why people might like it if it was their first Persona game back in 2005 or whenever, but it hasn't held up at all. But everyone was telling me constantly that like Persona 3 is the best one, Persona 3 is the best one. And I just wasn't seeing it. But it's only because a friend of mine got into Persona recently, through Persona 5 Royale,
yeah.
and they've gone back and they played Persona 4 Golden and didn't quite vibe with it, but they played Reload and they've actually really enjoyed it. And I was like, okay, if you're someone who's like couldn't stand 4 because you felt that was archaic, but 3 Reload has actually impressed you, maybe it'll actually fix some of the problems that I had with 3 Portable, and it has done so far.
Yeah.
Like Tartarus is already visually far more interesting than it was in 3
So the
Portable.
interesting thing about 3 Portable is that that is also a remake of Persona 3.
Hmm.
However, it is a remake with most of the bells and whistles completely removed.
Yeah.
I personally prefer Portable because it's got a battle system that actually works. Um, but I I know there's a lot of people who are uh really really big fans of the original PS2 game
Hmm.
because they played it first.
Yeah.
Um and they refuse to uh like accept Portable as the replacement that it had become.
Hmm.
And now that Reload is potentially replacing that in the
Hmm.
public conscious, I'm extremely curious to see what the consensus overall is going to be on that.
Yeah, because Reload's kind of interesting as from what they've actually like removed, because they've done some obviously quality of life stuff to it, and they've added some features like you can actually date Aegis in this one, which you couldn't do in 3 Portable or Fez.
No,
I think. Oh, no?
No, you couldn't do that in the original Persona 3. You have been able to do that since Fez.
You could do that in Fez?
Yeah, they added
Uh,
it in Fez.
Oh, okay. I didn't see that on the list of things that
Huh? Oh, he's gone.
are on the list of options. Maybe I
Okay.
was looking at an original
Hi.
one because I thought that was new here.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
okay then.
interesting. There's so pretty much this is feature complete, like
Mhm.
carrying over all of the Fez content except for the epilogue, the
Yeah,
answer.
the answer. Which I'm
Um,
super curious about that because everyone I've spoken to about the answer says it's hot garbage.
it's
So,
definitely something that exists. I just want to respond to this really quick.
Mhm.
Yellow Letters asking if we would ever put this on
Yeah.
Spotify or a podcasting website. I'm afraid we use a lot of copyrighted music. And
Hmm.
also, a big part of this podcast is talking to you, the viewer. Um, so it's weird to have it in an audio only format afterwards. We are considering making some podcasts. We have been working on some stuff uh, for a while now, and that
Yeah.
should be taking off soon. That
Hmm.
will be on podcast services as well as probably here,
Yeah, I
because
think
you
I
can have
think
a
I'll
podcast
upload it onto
tab
YouTube.
on YouTube.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there'll
Um,
be like discussion. They'll be sort of framed as a discussion in the same way that discussions are on YouTube,
yeah,
but there won't be any sort of real important visual element to it, so that they can work on Spotify and iTunes and whatever other places people listen to
yes.
podcasts.
Thank you for the question. We
Yes,
we have been talking about that,
yeah, it's a very topical one.
but yeah,
Um,
Persona 3 Reload. The answer, uh, is an unnecessary part of that storyline, and it's better off not being there. But
yeah,
there's talks that they're bringing it back as DLC.
yeah.
Um,
That's why I'm like, if they do it, will they? Because I don't feel like they can rewrite what happens in it. Like I have some vague ideas already. Because this is the one thing going into Persona 3 Reload, having started with other Personas. I've played Persona 4 Arena and 4 Arena
yeah.
Ultimax. I know what happens to the protagonist of
They
3.
technically don't
So,
need to rewrite the answer at all because it was always like a standalone epilogue.
hmm,
They can continue to write the characters out of character. They can
yeah.
just repackage the original The Answer wholesale and sell it as DLC, and nothing will change.
Uh,
Um,
Hopefully, they'll at least make the characters feel more
Hopefully
in
they'll
line.
they'll rewrite the character interactions because a lot of The Answer is okay in concept. It's
Uh-huh.
just a lot of the forced events that they have to make that a longer epilogue. Because originally, I don't know if anybody's aware of this, but in Japan, Persona 3 Fez was distributed as an update disc for
Oh,
Persona 3.
interesting. I didn't know
So
that.
they were actually literally selling it as DLC alongside, I believe, a complete edition later. If that
Oh,
happened, I know we got a complete edition.
yeah.
Uh, but yeah, um,
Mhm. But yeah, I think it's interesting that Reload removes some of the like more interesting mechanics from the original Persona 3. Like you can't send the other party members off to do their own thing around Tartarus anymore. Um, and also the fatigue system that you could exploit in order to get like your courage up faster is just completely gone now from the game.
yeah.
Like characters don't get sick or feel fatigue, which means going to the toilet and stuff is just kind of an extra thing that's not needed.
It's
It's
a feature complete repackage. You know, you could use the toilet in the original game. You can use it now.
yeah. But it's it's kind of funny because like usually Persona 4 I didn't, Persona 5 I kind of did because I played it way later after it came out. I'm the kind of guy who tries to do everything in a single run.
Oh
So,
no.
so I did that for
Oh.
Persona 5, and I wanted to do it for Persona 3, but because it's so new, there actually aren't any like spoiler-free guides or step-by-step instructions. But I looked at one for like Portable, and then realized immediately that things are just different in this game, like
Yeah.
subtly. Like Elizabeth gives you the quest way later in this game than she did in the original in Portable, and like you also I believe in Portable you're limited to doing like 3 quests at a time, whereas there's no limit in this one,
I
so you can
don't
just accept
remember.
every quest at
It's
the same
been
time.
a good 6 years since I played
Yeah.
Portable.
So it's interesting, some of those features, but yeah, I'm enjoying 3 Reload a lot more. We'll see. I've got to get. I'm in what, May now,
Yeah.
and last time I gave up on Persona 3 was in August. So we'll see how long it takes me to get to that point, and if I'm still enjoying it by then. But I know Persona 3 is also a much shorter game than the other Personas. Like everyone's sort of averaging around 50 to 60 hours to complete it, rather than 100 plus hours that Persona
That's
5 was.
that's really
So
just Persona 5 actually.
I feel like Persona 4 was also
Persona
like
4 is like pretty close to 3 from when I played it at least. I don't know
maybe
how
I'm
how I don't know if
misremembering it.
Reload like shortened it at all or made it shorter somehow, but um 3 and 4 came out like barely a couple hours difference. It's not like
Mhm.
108 hours or whatever the hell my Persona 5 Royal
Yeah.
uh save file ended at.
hmm But that's made it more encouraging for me to play, because
Honestly,
as I
that's
get older, I'm
interesting.
sicker of 100-hour games.
It's interesting talking about that because when I played Persona 5 Royal, my save time was the same as my Persona 5 vanilla save file. So they definitely actually shortened the game. However, they added more content, so the
Yeah,
epilogue just makes it the same length.
it's interesting. Like, so it's like, what did they do? Did they make dungeons shorter? Like,
Yes, dungeons are shorter, battles are changed. Some battles take less
Mhm,
time, some battles take more time. Generally, uh, random battles
mhm,
take far less time in Royal.
mhm.
But anyway,
Anyway, but
it,
that's what I've been playing.
it's
So,
this weird escalator of playtime,
mhm.
and Persona 3 Reload not really deviating from the Persona 3 playtime is good in my book. It didn't need to be like elongated at all or anything like that.
Yeah. Uh, so, all right, Infinite Wealth then.
Yeah, so I played 100 hour. I think I finished Infinite Wealth at 94 hours, but it is still overly long, excessively long. I'm not going to go into any spoilers, but I will just say that game takes 20 hours to start, and that's
Oh, good
infuriating,
God.
frustrating. They shove so many forced tutorials, not for gameplay mechanics, but for mini games, in your face that you have to do to continue the story, and they also shove irrelevant side stories in your face that you have to complete to continue the story, and it takes forever for interesting scenes to happen at the beginning of that game. Like it felt somewhat steady around the
Mhm.
7 hour mark. Some stuff was actually happening then, and then after you beat the first real big boss fight, um, it stops for 10 to 15 hours.
Oh,
Um,
okay. So it gives you time to then do a billion side quests.
it doesn't give you time to. You have to do 10 hours worth of guff in order to continue, and it's they call it sub story, but if you're forced to do it as part of the main story, is it really? I played Judgment right before Infinite Wealth, and that game also suffers from doing that. But
Hmm.
unlike Infinite Wealth, the sub stories in Judgment are used to like build characters of like your main characters and the people around the town.
Hmm.
Um,
Is this stuff like the Pokemon side quest
yeah,
sub
that's
story
forced.
with
That's
the
forced.
Digimon? Yeah.
The introduction to that is forced. Thankfully, no other portions of that are forced. I quit that immediately because it does not play good. It is
Oh
really
no.
boring. And I took no interest in it because it was far too absurd for me to even want to consider. Because theoretically, that shit's human trafficking. Um, and I don't
Mhm.
vibe with that.
I mean, that's a good thing to not vibe with.
Uh,
uh,
but yeah, there's just so much padding in this game, and me being the way I am with games and how I like my games to be focused and concise,
mhm.
I just didn't really vibe with a lot of the game. Um, I will say that things pick up once you start playing as the secondary protagonist, who is actually the main protagonist of the game. It's quite funny, actually. They introduce a new protagonist for the series, and then um, literally sideline him to the point that he does almost nothing of importance, uh,
Did
or
they
at
Ace
least,
Attorney'd it?
yeah, no. He turned into Ace Attorney 5 Phoenix within one game. I have
Mm.
never seen a regression of a character that fast.
Oh god.
But yeah, I would say most of Ichiban's stuff is pretty underwhelming to bad. I
Hmm.
was very not into it. I like his party members that he gets, and they have pretty complete stories. But the problem is that one of their stories lasts for the whole game, but another one of their stories lasts for about 4 hours, and then they just stick around for the entire rest of the game.
Ah, it's just like Persona. The best friend problem.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. I was much more into the game when you're playing as Kiryu. He is genuinely actually the main character of this story. Almost everything revolves around him, and the things that don't are given so little development that they feel like an afterthought or dropped plot elements.
Huh.
Like genuinely, there's a lot of things that come up that makes you think that they're going to be like a big deal, and then they are unceremoniously resolved and then never talked about again. Um,
How weird.
it's very weird. I will just say, going into this, if you're expecting a cool Ichiban story, I'm sorry. Um, I'm actually genuinely sorry. I liked Ichiban in 7. I really liked him a lot. I liked his story there too. But he does not much in this game. And what he does do feels so pointless and just like aimless that it's like it's a complete change from no, actually, I would say that Ichiban in this game feels like Kiryu in Yakuza 4, in that um Kiryu in that game wasn't even meant to be in that game.
Mm.
So
Oh,
he's
really?
added really late into the story and just does something. And then the story continues from where it left off without him there. Um
Weird.
that's what it feels like with Ichiban. The story happens and it involves him, but he doesn't really do anything extremely important. And the one thing he does that is extremely important it is never really explained how important it is or why it is important. You're
Is
just
this in sorry?
given
Is this in Yakuza 4 or Infinite Wealth?
infinite wealth. I've transitioned to
Okay.
infinite wealth. Uh, uh, but yeah, it, the gravitas of the situation is never elaborated on, um, which is so weird because this game has obvious parallels to the original Yakuza game. And in
Hmm.
that game, the stakes are very clearly set out, and it's extremely focused from start to end. It's all about this one series of events, and it does not deviate from that unless you're playing Kiwami. Fuck Kiwami. But Infinite Wealth has just so much nonsense, so much going on, that it's hard to focus on the actual big picture of what the story is supposed to be. Which is so weird. Uh, you get these smaller, intimate moments with Kiryu, which is why I liked the game in the end. But I, I don't. I've never been unsold on a replacement protagonist like this. Like it's either I don't accept them outright, or I accept them and then they continue to be a cool character. Um, it feels very much like the problem that Apollo Justice has actually, where he's introduced, he's this interesting character with a new perspective that has to overcome very similar challenges to the previous protagonist, but does it in his own way. And then he becomes a side character in the plots that are literally about him. Um, yeah, he doesn't feel fit to take the reins right now, especially where the story has concluded in
Hmm.
Infinite Wealth. And honestly, I want a new protagonist already because like I said, I played Judgment before this.
Hmm.
And oh my god, the protagonist of that game, Yagami,
Hmm.
um, he was a character I did not like. He was an asshole, kind of a piece of shit. Um, but he grows so much. He is such a good protagonist with actual character growth and development.
Hmm.
Um, and I felt like that was what I wanted to see from Like a Dragon going forward, not the silly shonen anime adventures of Kasuga Ichiban and his uh, borderline schizophrenia. Um,
Hmm. It'd be interesting to see then, I guess, what they do for Like a Dragon 9 if
yeah, I don't
they
know.
if they somehow stick with Kiryu, if they just go back to solo Ichiban, or if they do introduce an entirely new protagonist
It's such
again.
a bizarre situation because I felt several times during Infinite Wealth that
Hmm.
even though I must say I've been talking about the story the whole time, the game is a huge improvement in core gameplay over
Hmm.
7. The battle system is actually a functional battle system. You can tell that this isn't just something that the developers whipped up in a year. They put a lot of thought into how to improve what they had done before and make an actually competent RPG battle system, and it's fun. It's enjoyable. Um, but there were so many times during that game where I felt like this shouldn't be an RPG, especially with Kiryu. He does
Hmm.
not feel right. Um, being this turn-based character, and obviously he has the much publicized mechanic where his limit break escapes from the turn-based
Yeah,
gameplay.
and goes back to regular Yakuza of
Yes.
Like a Dragon.
Um, it there were so many times where there was a series of events that escalated really well, and I was like pumped and I was excited, and then it fades to black and it cuts out to your characters suddenly transported out on the street. Your party members are there now, and it's just an RPG battle, and then it cuts back and it's implied that Kiryu just actually beat these people up inside the space where they already were, and that was just the gameplay. And that sucks so much because it's so obvious what you do there. It's so obvious. You just beat people up inside the area. You don't have to teleport outside. But because the battle system is so heavily movement based, you need the space to roam. And the interiors that they made for these areas that they already made in 7 don't work for this battle system in 8.
Yeah. It doesn't fit, so they have to warp you out into an area you can actually have the open freedom to move around in.
Yes.
I wonder if, like, Kiryu was always intended to be in this game or not. Like,
It's
I'm
weird.
sort of curious, because that sounds like the sort of thing where they're making accommodations for adding in a character that doesn't quite fit the game design in last minute and trying to find workarounds for it. So I wonder, because if it is the case, what made them want to add Kiryu in?
Well,
were there enough people complaining that Like a Dragon 7 didn't have him outside of the cameo?
I actually think it's a case of the developers literally not wanting to use Ichiban, because they already have told 2 new stories with Kiryu after he was supposed to be wrapped up, and they half-assed this second, technically third story with Ichiban to the point where he feels flanderized and mischaracterized and not suited to be a protagonist. It feels like the decision to change the protagonist came from people less involved in the game, and they have since wanted to go back.
Yeah, well, I get the vibe that they changed Ichiban because he made more sense for the new gameplay style they were going for in 7.
No. There's a misnomer that the game was always meant to be an RPG. That is not the case.
Okay.
It was an action game, and then they released a funny April Fool's video with fake turn-based combat that was just like a CG video. And the reaction to that was so positive that they decided, oh, let's just make this the game. Which
that's interesting, because it feels like that should be like a spin-off.
It should. It shouldn't be the next numbered entry in the franchise.
That should be the Gaiden game. And Man Who Forgot His Name should be the actual next game in the mainline series.
It's just a strange turn of events, and I feel like the people making Like a Dragon might not be fully on board with the changes that they've had to set in the past couple of years.
Yeah. I guess we'll have to see with what happens next for the series.
It's possible that the original version of 7 wasn't like well received internally, like what Ozzy in the chat just said. And it's a possibility that we know one of the original drafts of 7, at least the storyline, because Ichiban was a protagonist in Ryoga Gotoku Online, which is just like a gacha card game.
Okay.
And it featured a alternate version of Ichiban's story with different characters, and he's written extremely differently there, which is strange. He almost beats somebody to death just because somebody tells him to. And I noticed the writer of that original draft had nothing to do with 7, but he's now the main writer of 8.
Oh, okay.
So
That is
something
interesting.
something weird happened there.
Hmm. Hmm.
But
Well,
anyway, that
anyway,
was interesting. We went on for a long time on that.
yes. Well, let's get on to the main topic. Although before, I just want to say to Wario Jim, uh, yeah, I do have ideas for what the next stuff will be. Next video on the Nintendo Chronicler, it's going to be from a very obscure series that you might not have heard of called The Legend of Zelda. So look out for that. But no, I have loads of ideas. I have like a little checklist of stuff I want to cover, and when I want to cover them, and what I want to do when I do. So just keep an eye out for that. I'm aiming to get one video out a month at least on that.
Yeah. I'm working on doing a similar venture over here because
Hmm.
our content output has mostly just been live streams and reviews. And
Yeah.
I want to make sure to correct that because a lot of people came here for our editorial videos or analysis
Hmm.
videos, and we haven't been doing a lot of those. I wanted to ask chat while they're here. I have been working on a video on and off for a couple months about the importance of music for video games. Is that something that you would be interested in watching? Because if I actually get like live interest in that, I would fast track it.
Hmm. Yeah, let us know your thoughts, chat,
Yeah.
and yeah, we'll see. In the meantime, shall we talk about the future of consoles and
Yes.
whether they will exist
I
anymore?
I
And
just wanted to say the title of the video is "Are Consoles Dying?" question mark, not "Consoles Are Dying." We've had two people like voice a a gut reaction to
Mhm,
the question being posed by the video, which
mhm.
is interesting because like it's not an inherent like statement. It's a
Yeah,
question.
it's a question, and you got to have a question to have a discussion.
Yeah.
Because I think it's interesting. So obviously, it's been a sort of a crazy week for all three of the core console gaming fandoms. Continuing on from last week's rumors around Xbox and the absolute meltdown of the idea that they were going third party, to then Sony's investor meeting that didn't make the PS5 look particularly better than the stuff about the Xbox, and then out of nowhere wrapping it up with the Switch 2 news, or rumors, I should say, not official. That's the only one that's not an official statement of it not being this year anymore and being pushed back to next year. Despite over the last year, everyone has been saying 2024, 2024, and Nintendo having a not having the direct that everyone thought they were going to have. Although it looks like the partner direct that was rumored for this week is actually next week now, and that seems a lot more concrete. But the fact that it's a partner direct and nothing there means people are also doom posting over the Switch running out of Steam this
Yeah.
year as well, and the Switch 2 delay being like, oh no, we're gonna have to wait a whole year with nothing to play. But and I feel like a lot. I mean, a lot of the Switch rumors are definitely the people's reactions to Switch rumors are definitely a huge overreaction. But I kind of also think the Microsoft reaction is a bit over the top as well. So let's start with Xboxes, I think, because it's
Oh my.
them on their way to basically becoming third party, kind of. Right? They had this podcast where they brought up the fact that 4 of their games are coming to other platforms. They didn't say which games they are,
Yeah.
but through context clues and just general thoughts and rumors, it seems very likely that Hi-Fi Rush and Sea of Thieves and Renowned, is that one of them? I'm trying to remember what the other two were now.
Pentiment was one of them.
Pentiment, that's it, and Grounded, that was the other one.
Grounded. Yes, that's right.
Yes. Those 4, but it like swearing that Starfield and Indiana Jones and stuff like that would be remaining as an Xbox exclusive. But I feel like the podcast kind of had very mixed messaging in it, because it sort of starts off with Phil Spencer being like, there will be no more exclusives in 10 years. The industry is heading in a way where it's better for games to be available to everyone, blah, blah, blah. And then talking about, like, how these 4 games are going to be, that they're releasing 4 games on other platforms. But then kind of pivots to going, oh, but don't worry, Xbox fans, because we will have exclusives still, and we're also making a new system, and it's going to be super duper powerful, and it'll have loads of exclusive games on it. So we're not going third party. We're just choosing to tactically release a few games on other platforms.
Yeah, and remove the Xbox branding from their websites.
Yeah, and it's like, what's going on here with Microsoft and Xbox? Like, this is 2 completely opposite stands that Phil is making back to back in the same podcast, and I feel like the second one feels more like a damage control. We need to tell people that there's still a reason, who are like loyal to Xbox, that there's still a reason to buy Xbox and stick with here. So we're going to promise that things are exclusive still. We're going to promise that we're making a new console with reasons to buy.
Yeah.
But that's not actually the truth, kind of thing.
It's weird. It feels like the same situation to me that Nintendo has been in the past, where they have said multiple times that they weren't making new systems, and then they announced a new one like a month later.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is the truth or not, what they have voiced over at Xbox in their podcast, but like it's there's enough room for doubt that it's hard to take them at their word.
See, I was talking to a friend about this last week when all this news was sort of dropping, and he brought up a good point, that it feels like what Microsoft's strategy is that they're basically trying to do what Steam has done with like the Steam box and the Steam Deck, even potentially, where they're synchronized, because a lot of Xbox games also release on PC, and trying to synchronize those markets. They already do that with some games that you can buy. Like if you buy Starfield for Xbox, you also get it on PC, so you have the option to play on both and transfer saves over on both.
Yeah.
And it feels like what Microsoft's logic is going to do, what like the best business decision to do, is to keep the Xbox consoles around, but just basically make them mini PCs that are like good enough for people who can't be bothered to build their own PC. Because it's so much easier nowadays to just make a PC, and advancements have gone along well enough where it's far more common for the layperson to just build a PC and play games on PC instead. Which has made like the console race that both Microsoft and Sony have been a part of trying to make the most powerful thing. It's slowly just morphed both the PS5 and Xbox Series into mini PCs that just don't connect to the internet. Well, don't connect and have web browsers and stuff.
Yeah.
And now with the Steam Deck and everyone else releasing all these sort of handheld systems that are all about playing PC games on the go, it feels like that's Microsoft's next logical step. That would be like the smartest thing. Just a box that can run their games and run Game Pass, that's effectively just a computer that's already pre-built for people and branded as an Xbox, and just do that, but then have all of their other stuff like Game Pass and all of their games on as many platforms as possible, and become more of a software-focused developer.
Yeah,
kind of like Steam.
That is unfortunately not a very viable position to be in, because there are pre-built PCs that still doesn't appeal to the kind of audience that wants a console, that wants a hassle-free increasingly less hassle-free, but still like less work than making a PC. But like that hassle-free experience that has little room for error.
Hmm.
So many people I know either can't assemble a PC because they don't live in the kind of markets where that stuff's available,
Hmm.
or uh, they don't want to build a PC because it's so much work, it's exhausting. They'd rather just buy a new thing that will just play whatever they get immediately.
Yeah. Well, immediately in quotes after like a 40-minute download and wait about even when it's a physical CD.
Yeah,
God, I hate that.
a uh common take that I've seen by the one guy in chat who keeps saying it every time is there is an older leak where they said that Microsoft was going to not make the hardware themselves anymore, that it would be
Hmm.
licensed out, the brand would, to other companies to make their own Xboxes, the Philips
Hmm.
CDI method. um
That just doesn't feel like it would work for me. I think it would get too confusing if there were
yeah,
multiple different Xboxes on the market.
it feels so weird. um an oversaturated market is one where almost all players like lose,
Hmm.
because
Exactly.
there's just so many options that people, well, obviously only buy some of them or one of them at most,
Hmm.
and overall the returns would be like about the same, but it's spread out across so many different companies that it is a much less profitable business venture for Microsoft as a whole.
Hmm.
Now, granted, they are one of, if not uh, the most uh, profitable companies already, and Xbox is literally just a side venture for them. So it might not matter in the long run,
Hmm.
but it, it, it it's it feels like they're just playing games now with their business ventures. Like, they've been in a perpetual state of decline ever since the Xbox One's disastrous launch,
Yeah.
and that tanked the brand so bad that
Mm.
uh every single mistake they make that might have been minor in the past uh, just like further blemishes their overall image.
Yeah.
It's so it, I feel like I am watching the death of a brand in real time, and it's it's interesting because I was alive for the death of Sega as a console manufacturer,
Oh, same,
but I
yeah.
was not technically cognizant enough to experience it.
Hmm.
And seeing that happen now, uh, it definitely feels like I'm in a historical moment, in the sense that it's not like this major landmark. It is this point in time where everything is just fizzling out and continues to get worse.
Yeah, it's because if you look back at like even the Xbox One, the whole reason they marketed that and the One name comes from the idea that they just wanted to be this one multimedia
Yeah.
hub for everything in your house. But that already kind of exists with smart TVs and
Yeah.
stuff now, so there's no reason to have an Xbox to do that. You want a device that has Netflix and all the streaming services and music players and all that. Well, yeah, basically any TV can do that nowadays. And so it feels like Xbox kind of pivoted to Game Pass being their main focus, which
Yeah.
seems to be doing well for them at least, and has become like a Game Pass machine.
Yeah.
But then the Series X and the Series S, they pivoted from having the one option to just trying to get this to as many people as possible. But the Series S has completely floundered what they can do software-wise, because everyone who releases a Series X game has to make one for the Series S, which is extremely underpowered. But they have to design games for the Series X and then work backwards from there to get it to work on the Series S while not losing any features, which is like one of the big things that keeps a lot of Xbox games running, like from coming out. Sorry,
Yeah.
and I think that's like, I don't know how well I can trust Microsoft to be a software dev, because if like Game Pass wants to be their focus and they'll release a new system, like a new Xbox, a stronger Xbox that's basically just a PC at this point, and it's digital, because the other rumors is obviously them getting rid of physical and just going to digital only, which is something I think they sort of wanted to do anyway with the Xbox One. And I feel like that's absolutely going to happen with they'll do a Sony, where, you know, Sony's released this digital PS5 or whatever, and then you can buy a CD
It's
tray
already
as like
happened.
a side add-on.
The Xbox Series S is digital only.
No, yeah. But can you buy a CD add-on and then plug it into the Series S to play physical games?
I'm not sure, but it would be weird if that wasn't an option.
Because I think that's like something that one of the PS5 models does, like the Slim or the Pro or whatever it's called. But obviously
No,
for the
apparently.
no. I feel like maybe I've dreamt this. But this feels like I feel like with the next Xbox, they're just gonna go fully digital and have it be a Game Pass machine, and have it be, you can play all the Xbox games and all the Activision Blizzard games on Xbox, and they'll get around exclusivity by having everything be timed exclusivity, and just like, we're releasing this first. Because when Phil says in the podcast, like, he's trying to reassure people, and he's like, oh, you know, Indiana Jones and Starfield, they're not going to be going anywhere, those are Xbox exclusives. But one of the reasons he gives for why some of these games, like Hi-Fi Rush, or Grounded or whatever, are coming, is that they're more than a year old.
Yeah.
Which to me just says, what Phil's really saying here is, Indiana Jones won't go multiplat at launch. But in a year from now, after the game has come out, now it's fair game to go multiplat.
Before we move on to a company in this same situation that you just described, I'd just like to touch on Game Pass for a moment. Because, like, Game Pass is very good for the consumer. Game Pass lets people play a lot of games without spending an exorbitant amount on them. And as games are starting to more and more just become $70 baseline, the idea that you only need to pay $10 or $11 a month to play most of those $70 games, and then be done with them, is definitely very appealing. However, I do know that Game Pass, for companies that aren't Microsoft, and by companies I do mean larger companies, essentially bleeds money for them, because then those people don't buy the games, and the overall sales for those games are quite low as a result. If it's a big enough name, it will still sell, but if it's a middle of the road title, like something like Persona, it's seeing a lot of that. A lot of players are seeing. It's seeing a lot of players through Game Pass and not through services where they've actually purchased the game.
Yeah. So then it's not appealing for them to put their games on Game Pass. They have to really weigh up the cost at the start of whether the millions that Microsoft are going to offer them for that Game Pass is worth it with compared to the millions that they might get selling it as an actual thing. Which is probably why we're not getting stuff like Visions of Mana on Game Pass.
Yeah.
I feel like we're getting less games coming to Game Pass on launch now.
I noticed a lot of people played the Yakuza series, including myself, through Game Pass.
No,
but
sure.
they made the decision to not have the newest mainline game on it, so people would actually have to buy it. I sure did, and I regret it. I regret it so much. Oh god.
See, that is funny that you said that, because that was something that was literally told to me a few weeks back when Steam had that sale and they had the entire Yakuza series except for 7 and 8 on like for $40 or whatever it was, £40. And I was talking to a friend. I was like, "This is a really good deal. I just don't know if I'd have the time to actually play any of the Like a Dragon games." And my friend's response was, "You could do that, or you could just spend like a tenner for Game Pass and get them all anyway."
Yeah.
And just play that instead. And I was like, "Yeah, I guess you're right, actually."
Yeah, I played 4 through Gaiden on Game Pass. Although I did have 0 on Steam, so I played that on Steam in the middle of 5 and 6. And I went back and I bought 6, and somebody else bought me 7, but I still don't have most of those games that I played through Game Pass.
Yeah. And you don't really have a reason to. Like, unless you give up Game Pass but want to replay them in the future, there's no reason to... Or you want to collect them, I guess.
Yeah.
Not a reason
I don't have Game Pass anymore. I just picked it up to play the Yakuza games and then stopped. I did also play Persona 5 Royal through it, which led to a very funny situation where I had to speed run the last 20 hours of the game in a day.
Before your Game Pass ran out.
Yeah.
That is kind of funny. But yeah, so just to sort of go back to Xbox's software, if they want to become like a Game Pass machine and they want to push that as their main thing, I don't think they've given me any confidence this generation that they can even release software at a reasonable pace to do this.
Yeah.
Like, it feels like another problem, and we'll talk about this with the next company we also discuss in this podcast. It feels like the software, the amount of exclusive releases they have, software-wise, is just really lacking compared to what they had in the 360 and even the Xbox One era. And that's also a big problem if you want to keep people around from a brand. Even, like, releasing Xbox... It feels like they're having to release Xbox games on other platforms and rely on those games selling again, or reaching a wider audience to make up for the fact that they don't actually have enough exclusives coming out. Because what is this year for Microsoft? There's Indiana Jones, which I'm assuming is this year.
Does that come out this year? Hold on, let me check.
And then Fable is the other game that I think is meant to be this year. And I think that's it, unless we get like a shadow dropped game like Hi-Fi Rush was.
It's set for 2024. No real thing other than the year 2024.
Yeah. So
let me just look into upcoming releases from Microsoft to settle this. Let's see.
Yeah, you do that. It looks like Phantom's going to join us as well. Give it a little opinion on give his take on the Xbox stuff. But that's I think the big thing for me with Microsoft. I don't think Microsoft believe in the console business, but I also think Phil's podcast, I think he's a big liar. I guess he's technically not a liar, but the way he has framed this scenario is like misleading, because I think Microsoft's future is very much going to be third party. Every game they release will eventually come to another platform at this point, through Activision Blizzard or Bethesda or just their own internal stuff. It will just be on Xbox for like a year, so that the people who are committed to buying Xbox and only want to play Xbox, they get that. That's their benefit of having the system, early access to these games. But they will end up on every platform, and they will still make another Xbox machine, but it will literally just be a digital-only power upgrade that has Game Pass on it, and you can download games directly from the Microsoft Store onto the Xbox if you want to buy your games, but there won't be any physical games on the Xbox side of things, because they just don't care about that anymore. It just doesn't matter. So they're going to be having exclusives, focusing on just one system, because I don't think they're going to do the Series S, Series X thing again with the next generation. I don't think that's worked out for them. They'll just release one slightly stronger system than the Series X, and just have games, and then have those games ported to PlayStation 6 or Switch 2, depending on if they can run them or not. I do believe, the one thing I do believe, Phil, and fully, is that I don't think Game Pass is going to come to other platforms. I think they're going to try and use Game Pass as like one of the big reasons to actually have an Xbox box, even though it's also on Windows.
That's why they've rebranded it to Game Pass instead of Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah. But I do believe that that's not coming to PlayStation 6 or Switch 2. Not unless Microsoft does really badly in the next generation,
to me,
and they need it.
To me, it feels like Microsoft is becoming very hands-off with their state in the console industry. And if it does pan out that they even relinquish the manufacturing of their consoles to other companies, that's as hands-off as you can get.
Yeah. I do wonder when these decisions, like rumors say that these sort of decisions from Microsoft started being discussed last summer, but given how much Microsoft spent in the Activision Blizzard case trying to fight to have COD be like exclusive to Xbox and being fought against by like everyone else, I wonder what I do wonder, because it feels like a big waste of time if this was going to be the way that you were going to head down anyway. I wonder if them failing to do that and realizing that COD would have to be multiplayer anyway was one of the big things that made them turn around and be like, fine, if COD's multiplayer, we'll make everything multiplayer. Instead, forget it.
They genuinely acquired Activision Blizzard just to put Call of Duty on Game Pass.
I believe it, yeah.
Like, that is the reason they did it. That is such a huge venture for them that they bought an entire fucking company for one IP.
God, it's a big IP, though. A good news, at least for us Nintendo fans, it means that if we do ever see a Banjo-Kazooie game again, the chances of it coming to Switch is, like, extremely high. Or Switch 2, I should say.
I see you have your priorities in order. And yeah, they acquired Activision Blizzard 2 years after they intended to. So that process of getting the company might have changed their strategy.
Yeah. I see Phantom, you're here now. Do you want to give any thoughts on Microsoft before we move over to Sony, who we'll talk about next?
Good morning, Source Gamers. I honestly was genuinely hoping that... I had zero feeling that it would happen, but I was genuinely looking forward to Xbox going third party. Which sounds really messed up, because in the process of that, of course, that means people lose their jobs, which is already happening, unfortunately, which of course very much sucks. And I was actually surprised to hear even Phil Spencer admit that we had to. There was a lot of people we had to let go in sort of restructuring the company in that podcast. I thought he was just gonna kind of leave that to the side, but I was hoping that they would go third party because in the same way that a lot of people tend to feel that don't own an Xbox, what is the purpose of owning an Xbox if
Mhm.
all of the games are coming to PC? And between the rumors that people were hearing, oh, if they're going to be putting all their games on, or a lot of their games on different platforms, then they're kind of stepping out of the console market, which as somebody who is a very is the gamer trademark non-derogatory, it's like, yeah, what is the purpose of owning an Xbox? I'm never gonna and if I did have an Xbox, if I also have a PC, then all the games that I am looking to play are not necessarily exclusive to Xbox. So having that piece of hardware no longer makes sense for me to have. Whereas people that are not like the hardcore gamers in the sense of being really deep in it and with a lot of knowledge of how they want to play their games, they're going to still be buying an Xbox very much likely, either whether it's an Xbox Series S or Xbox Series X, and then they'll keep playing their game, and then they'll keep playing those games even if they're not exclusive, because there's different types of gamers that literally just want one specific thing, or do just really stick to that one console that they've always stuck to since they were younger. Like I have a friend that
Mhm.
it wants to Switch Lite just to play Princess Peach Showtime. The only other console that she has is a PS3 because she plays COD. And
Mhm.
once Call of Duty drops, she that on like maybe only Xbox, then maybe she would buy an Xbox because there's only certain games that she has an interest in playing, and that's how it is for a lot of other people as well.
Mhm.
At the same time, again though, what is the purpose of buying an Xbox if they could also, like for instance, for Call of Duty,
Mhm.
they're doing that 10-year deal where they're still keeping Call of Duty on PlayStation, and then also um putting PlayStation and Switch, while
Mhm.
also still having it on of course on Xbox. For PlayStation people, it's already like, okay, well, if they're gonna keep it on Xbox, then there's not necessarily any reason for me to buy an Xbox. I don't have to worry about that for at least the next 10 years.
Yeah.
For Switch people are now getting that. They might not get a campaign made with it, and it might also be cloud, but there's that. So
I feel like we'll start that on Switch too, I
yeah,
reckon.
so it's kind of like, then what the point? What is my bad? What is the point of buying an Xbox? If also one of the biggest gaming franchises ever that pulls in a lot of money is also not even going to be exclusive to Xbox.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
so-
true.
yeah,
With the Xbox, like between the PS, I've had no interest in the PS5 either this generation.
right.
The only reason I considered getting an Xbox, in the end, and it was going to be a Series S, was
Mhm.
purely because of how cheap it was. Like, I was like having this little thing that I'd been seen being sold for something like £150. Just having this by the TV and using that instead of the PS4 as my multimedia stuff, and then just having Game Pass on that, so that I could play games that don't come to Switch 1, I should say. We're not the Switch 2.
I,
So I
I
could
thought
play
about
games
that
that
a bit
come
as
from the
well
Switch but
too.
are only on Xbox and PC.
Right.
But like, we got a Steam Deck instead, and that does the
Yo.
same job as
Jeez.
the Xbox, and like better. And actually, quick side tangent.
Mhm.
I actually do think, alongside a console in the next generation, Microsoft is also going to attempt to do their own version of the Steam Deck. Because
So
why not? Like, there are loads of third-party companies making these little handhelds as well. Not Steam Deck's the best one out on the market right now.
I
But if anyone's going to be able to compete with them, I think Microsoft using the Xbox branding to make their own little handheld that can play all the games on Xbox in the same way that the Steam can, or at least most of them. That just seems like a logical part of their plan to try. That makes more sense to me than what the Series S and Series X does.
right.
To just have the Xbox handheld be a side thing. 'Cause even Sony's trying to do that with their whatever it's called, the one that's more like a Wii U. But if Microsoft, and I think out of, well, Nintendo already has a handheld. I think between Sony and Microsoft are the ones more likely to be successful making
Right.
this kind of Steam Deck like. So I think that's something they'll do. Windows is pretty atrocious for mobile devices.
Windows phones.
But I think they would try it anyway and see.
PlayStation Portal, that's what it was called.
PlayStation Portal, thank you.
It
is what all the third-party companies do, though. But like Microsoft's not really making money from that. Like they may as well do it on their own. I personally think it should run an Xbox UI if it was going to, but I could see them going the Windows. It depends on how much like the Steam Deck they want it to. Like the Steam Deck is effectively just a portable computer when you have desktop mode, and I don't necessarily think the Xbox would need that. So, Xbox can just run on the Xbox UI. The main thing on that is obviously trying to avoid a Series S situation where you have to have everything run on both the handheld version of the Xbox and the console one, and the handheld one is obviously not going to be as powerful. It kind of depends on how Microsoft wants to frame that, if they want to treat this handheld as like an accessory to the Xbox rather than its own system. But yeah, that was just a thought I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Phantom?
Have you guys discussed any of the leak stuff in regards to Xbox?
Yeah, we did a bit at the start.
Okay.
But,
I think another...
let's.
Oh yeah.
I just want to say, if you've got any other thoughts on Microsoft, let's just get them quickly, because I do want to move on to Sony, because I have a hard. You two can keep talking about it, but I have a hard stop on 40 minutes, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Knowing some of their at least intentionally, no, my bad, the thing that they were planning for, or the thing that they may still consider to do, that's kind of another reason why I wanted them to drop out of the console market. I'm not aligned with their vision, of course.
Yeah, fair. All right, so that's Microsoft. That's they've arguably been the biggest one of these three over the last few days, more like over the last 2 weeks. But Sony didn't exactly come out looking great from their investors meeting. Now, obviously, the PS5 is doing a lot better than the Xbox, and Sony, even though they are releasing some games on Steam, they're not planning on going full third party, at least not that we know of. However, the PS5 hasn't been selling particularly well. It's been at least not as good as they want it to be. And the news that they consider the PlayStation 5 in the latter stage of its life cycle is kind of a big hit. Because it makes the PS5 look like it has less games on it than the Dreamcast or the Wii U or which is pretty dire. Because like Xbox has not Xbox. PS5 doesn't feel like it's in the latter stage of its life cycle at all, even though it's been around for 4 years now or something like that. And I think that's partly because of all of the difficulty people had at the start from getting one. But it's also just because there still hasn't been any particular software that makes it a must-have. Because everything else has come out on the PS4. Like the news that when Sony dropped this news, coincidentally, was the same day I just bought Persona 3 Reload, which is like the first PS4 game I bought in ages. But the fact that I'm buying a brand new, just released PS4 game that isn't something like Just Dance or FIFA,
right,
in the same time that Sony is being like the PS5 is in the second half of its life cycle, kind of says a lot about where they currently stand in the marketplace. They did really well in the PS2. The PS3 floundered at the start, but they picked it back up. The PS4 was easily the best one of its generation. And then the PS5 has come out and it feels like it's completely fallen over. It's completely disastered itself. Because it doesn't even have something like Game Pass that makes it kind of stand out. Sony really needs to rely on its exclusives, just in the same way that Nintendo does, in order to make it feel different. But they haven't been releasing any, especially themselves. They've been so focused on doing big AAA budget games rather than, and only that their release schedule for games is basically just like one a year, which makes the PS5 look completely barren for exclusives, in my opinion. And it has to rely on stuff like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, like paying for that to be a year exclusive so that it has something.
6 months.
Or 6 months
Yeah, 6
even
months,
then,
yeah.
not even a year. And as I was talking to my friend the other day, he got a PS5 specifically because he runs fighting game tournaments and needs one for Tekken. And that's the only way that Sony is managing to get sales from these big competitive games that people need for events. And the PS5 is like the better way of running it. Which is a very specific use case.
Of the 13 PlayStation 5 only games, one is a pack-in title, one is exclusive for only 6 months, one is coming to other platforms for sure. It's a 3-month exclusive? Oh my god. Not 6 months, 3 months.
Oh, it comes
Oh,
out
jeez.
May, I think.
Oh
Um,
May
wow.
is when that date ends.
and
for
2 of them
exclusivity.
are VR games, which are inherently limited because you also need a PSVR 2 to play them.
Yeah.
Were you implying the Demon Souls remake was gonna come to other platforms?
No, I was implying
Oh.
that Spider-Man 2 is.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Demon Souls and Bloodborne's PS4, I guess, not PS5.
Bloodborne's not leaving the PS4 anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty bad state, and Sony really only has themselves to blame. Like, Xbox has made a lot of really bad decisions since the Xbox One, but I can at least see what they're trying to do, and it's just not working. But all of Sony's decisions just do not make sense to me as a console manufacturer. It's like they see every single game has to be some bajillion seller and put like millions upon millions of dollars into each one, and do all of this to make them like the best possible games ever that they can be, and then they come out and they're like either really great or just fine. But this is the one game that they've released, and obviously I think everyone sort of compared that to Nintendo, in how Nintendo releases like 13 games a year, and they have like one that is their big one, but then they have another 4 that are like not as big, not the big AAA but AA, and then they have an additional 7 that are all like triple B or single A games instead. But that like makes their output look like it's pretty consistent, because I think having a higher quantity of games is probably more important than having the highest quality game possible. And rather than, while I'm not saying Sony should be trying to obviously emulate Nintendo to the exact, I think them going around and closing all of their single A studios, like Japan Studios, obviously the big one, and just putting all of their focus into stuff like The Last of Us is like bad. Like really bad, and it's not worked out for them in any way.
And
But
that's
they
part
seem
of it.
hell bent on still going ahead with this plan for the PS5. It's it's not good. Unlike Xbox, where you could kind of debate if they're going to do a console or not, and I think they are. I think PS6 is definitely going to happen. But I think Sony are going to have a really hard time pushing the PlayStation 6 if they can't solve this problem now with the PlayStation 5. Because I don't think it's going to be... I don't think they're going to have... Basically, I think the PS5 has already had its best year sales-wise, and I don't think it's going to go up. Which isn't great for them.
If a PS6 were to happen, which won't be like anytime necessarily soon, probably like in maybe another 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you would have to get to that point where it's like, oh, okay, PS6 is coming out, but people are still releasing games for the PS5. Why would we not just run into that situation again? And people are still releasing games for the PS4 now, which that's not a bad thing, but for the PS5, that ends up being a bad thing when a lot of your games are not exclusive to
Yeah.
PS5. I mean, so their PlayStation Studio games are, in the sense of if you're talking about just consoles, a lot of the PlayStation Studio games are just releasing on PS5 now, which is good in that sense. But when all your third party is releasing games for PS4 still, even though the PS5 can play it, now new people who never had a PS4 before may go and say, "Oh, I'll get myself a PS5 because it can do both." Which that is kind of the selling point. That ability for backwards compatibility that the PS5 has is what can push it. Outside of that, and then of course then people again once, and then you have also the market of people that don't do PC gaming, and then you kind of have your PS5 market. Outside of that, you kind of get to this point where when would it stop? Because one of the things that, at least in my view of PlayStation, is that even if you're not playing PlayStation's titles and the PlayStation Studio titles, you are playing third-party titles that are not releasing anywhere else. This seemingly, you could say more, definitely more on the PS3 side at the time, and then maybe not as much so for PS4 as we started moving more and more to PC gaming. When it's the case that people, that their third-party publishers are seeing a lot more weight and success, and also publishing their games on PC and also other platforms. Now that strong third-party backing that you had isn't there as much because other people can buy other consoles to still get those games. And the only cases where that's not happening is, of course, like a situation like a Final Fantasy VII or a Final Fantasy 16, or it's pretty much Square Enix titles. And that's going to potentially hurt them in the long run, because if it ever becomes a case now that Square Enix is seeing that their games just happen to sell more on these other platforms, or maybe even on PC, why, and their top sales aren't on PlayStation, why would they then release first on a platform that is not going to be their immediate biggest sales, when they could get released on a platform that does give them an immediate sales, and then also even more additional sales as time keeps going on, like lifetime sales, generates more lifetime sales. It's gonna, outside of that, I can't necessarily see a reason in the sense of where Sony could pull themselves out of that hole, because in the sense of trying to just support the PS5, they did that themselves, but their parties aren't. Other than that, I can't. It's not like they're doing horribly. They're not doing bad, but they're not where they want to be.
No.
I don't necessarily see as well why releasing something like I truly wonder how well the PlayStation Portal sold, because I feel like an idea like that was just putting out money, and then it would feel like a waste of money. What was the point of doing that?
That is not an unusual thing, though, for Sony to do, like throw out a completely random side peripheral to whatever their generation is, and then watch it basically get abandoned as it fails to sell. I feel like the iToy and PlayStation VR are like the only two times where they've done it and it's been actually successful for them. Like,
well, at least those are like, that's like a different way to play your games, also while being able to play your games, whereas a PlayStation Portal is like, you're not going to use it like a Switch because it's like based on streaming.
Yeah, it's the Wii U. They reinvented the Wii U, which is actually kind of fitting, because I've been thinking about this situation with the PS4, PS5, PS6 as similar to the Wii U to Switch, because like you have the Wii, which was insanely popular and loads of people bought it, and then the Wii U came out, and it was obviously a next step up. But a lot of people didn't see a point in buying it because they already had stuff for the Wii, and they weren't interested in anything that was exclusive for the Wii U, not enough to be willing to jump over to it.
Right.
And so the Wii U was just floundering around. and then the Switch comes out instead, and they push that and they make that a much better seller, and they start having all of Wii U games also on the PS6. Not PS6, sorry, the Wii U games on the Switch. Yeah. Sorry. And so a lot of people who decided not to bother with the Wii U started buying all of these games that were effectively new to them, and having that on the Switch. And obviously the situations aren't exactly the same, because you couldn't get Wii games. People weren't releasing many games that were Wii and Wii U as well, especially Nintendo wasn't doing any of that.
There were no Wii and Wii U games.
I feel like there
aside
was
from
like
like
Just
Dance
and stuff. Yeah.
So sports games.
I think there was a soccer game released for the Wii that was just like the previous years in a new package.
Yeah, it was FIFA. FIFA did that. Remember that was a big shit.
They
show.
released it on Wii and not Wii U.
Yeah. But and then like, yeah. So, but that's obviously not quite comparable, because also the Wii U sort of flopped because Nintendo marketed it like garbage, like really badly, to the point that people didn't even know it was a new system. Which obviously the PlayStation 4 to 5 isn't that same problem. But the reason I'm comparing them is because I get the vibe that the PS5 is Sony's Wii U, and when the PS6 comes out, I don't think we'll necessarily have a situation where, even if the games that they're releasing come out on PS5 and PS6 as well, I don't necessarily think people will buy a PS5 to play these new games. It's going to be more like people will buy a PS6 and just treat these games as PlayStation 6 games, rather than getting a PS5, if that makes sense, in the same way that people treat stuff like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Tropical Freeze as Switch games, rather than Wii U games. Because when they're releasing games that are on the PS5 and PS6, those ones, hopefully not for Sony, aren't also on PS4. So,
Right, yeah.
So like anyone who didn't see a reason to buy a PS5, because every game that Sony released bar 6 are on PlayStation 4 as well, will just buy a PS6 in that case and treat all those games as new. So this might end up being a case where the PS5 is just the Wii U for Sony, and then the PS6 actually manages to pick stuff back up. But I think to do that, it also needs to have a stronger software output, because if Microsoft is obviously going its way, and PC is also becoming a bit more accessible for people, and who knows what the Switch 2 is going to do power-wise. I mean, if it's rumours that like it's going to be something like a Series S, so I imagine it wouldn't be able to run PS6 games, but you never know. Sony, I think, still needs a stronger software output to have... because I think the PS6 being able to play PS5 games as well as PS6 games is more of a lucky break for them in the PS6 potentially doing well, as opposed to it being a viable strategy, because otherwise it's just going to repeat, because everyone will buy the PS6 and the PS7 will come out in like a decade and a half and no one will buy it because every game will be on the PS6 as well, and they're just going to loop. They're just going to be like a roller coaster going up and down in their sales. That's the way I've been thinking about the PlayStation situation anyway. But it is pretty dire that they don't have anything new coming. They do have new games coming, obviously, but barely any stuff. Especially with the amount of IP that Sony actually sit on as well. Because they could easily rival Nintendo in terms of IP releases, and they arguably did on the PS2 and even early PS3 and the PSP, and they've just abandoned that, and it's sad.
You want to put their money into more blockbuster titles, and
yeah,
if they want to do that, okay, get ready to see what happens. And they saw what happened. It's like, damn, this shit was a lot of money.
Yeah, the big problem is that games now take 4 to 5 years to develop, so that steady output isn't possible.
Yeah.
Which
feels
is
like that's
so
why
weird, because that problem only exists in the quadruple A gaming space, which is what a lot of Western AAA just doesn't exist anymore. It's quadruple A or less than AAA. There is no in between anymore. The in between used to be AA. Now it's not. There's a huge gap in terms of production value on games these days produced in Western countries. And then Japan, AAA still exists there, and they're actually getting better about project management. They have recovered from the initial shock of the HD era, and kind of perfected their output. Freaking Like a Dragon usually makes its games in 1 year at a time, and then I found out that Like a Dragon Gaiden was developed in 6 months. I'm like, what the hell's going on? But Sony exists in this extremely awkward space where the majority of their exclusive titles that are actually exclusive, despite being a Japanese company, are Western developed, and they've decided to go all in on that, and those games are going to take 4 to 5 years to make, making pretty much their entire first-party output completely meaningless.
Yeah.
Each company will produce 1 or 2 games max for the platform, and then eventually they'll just go to PC now. So there is no point in buying a PS5 unless you really want to play PS4 games with less load times.
Yeah, and this is why I think we've seen them do stuff like remake The Last of Us, do the Last of Us Part 2 remaster that came out. The rumors that they're also doing Until Dawn.
No.
Until Dawn.
It was
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Zero Dawn.
That's the one.
Yes.
Horizon Zero Dawn remake remaster. It's because they need to fill the gaps where they're just not going to have new stuff, and it's quicker for them to redo games, but they can only really do it for recent games.
Oh, they are also porting Until Dawn?
PS4 to PS5.
They are also porting Until Dawn.
Yeah, they are porting Until Dawn as well.
I was under the impression that the Horizon Zero Dawn re-release was actually a remake from what's been said. So that's why I corrected you.
Yeah, no, that's the one I did mean. I didn't mean to say Until Dawn, but Until Dawn is getting ported. But okay. I meant to say Horizon Zero Dawn.
Yeah, that's getting a Last of Us 1 style remake, which is
it feels like
ridiculous.
They're doing that because it's a PS4 game, so it's a lot easier to bring that sort of over to the PS5, and they don't have to change much. They don't have to do the concept arting phase again. They don't have to do fully make everything from scratch. They just need to improve upon what's already there, and it's easier to do that for a PS4 game than it is to do that for a PS1 game. And so that's why they're doing it. But they're desperately trying to fill in the cracks instead of making smaller budget games. And it's kind of I'm really wondering what turned this, because in the PS4, Sony had a really good short time initiative where they were like, we've remade Parappa the Rapper. We've remade the first Medieval game, and we're selling them for fairly cheap. And they were clearly lower budget games, but they were remakes from IP that people wanted to see more of, and they filled a space in Sony's library. So people were super thrilled about it, and they've just. I don't think those games sold poorly. Sony just decided, I guess, they didn't sell well enough, or there was no point in doing it.
The Parappa the Rappa PS4 game is actually not a remake, it's an HD texture pack applied to the PSP game.
Ah, okay.
It's bizarre. There's so much input lag for a rhythm game. It is terrible.
Still, that's them at least doing something to fill out.
It is definitely not nothing. It is more than nothing.
It's just bizarre that we don't have any more games like that, or even Astro Bot's Playroom. Most people I speak to with the PS5 tend to put that one out as like one of the best exclusives the PS5 has, and
That's the
shows off a
pack-in
lot of what the
title.
PS5 can do.
That
Like,
is
especially
just
with the
pre-installed on the
controller.
system.
Yeah, I know. But why did instead of like following up on that, because they did it when they did like PSVR, and you got a pack-in title with the PSVR, and it had an Astrobot thing, and people loved that so much they made a full-ass game out of it.
Yeah.
Why have they not done that with Astrobot? Instead, they just closed Japan's studio and decided they weren't going to do anything with it anymore. What's going on?
They want to go big.
Yeah,
It's really
apparently.
what it seems like, because you gotta remember that also Sony is also like a, or was already, I don't want to use this, I'm using this word in the wrong way, I'm pretty sure, media conglomerate, but like they do more than just, of course, games. They also do like movies and tech and stuff as well. So it's kind of like they're also choosing to take a lot of, or yeah, take a lot of their properties and also adapt them into other forms of media that will also be successful. We saw with the Last of Us show. Not that I'm not saying that it's a bad show. I'm just saying, yeah, they did that with the Last of Us show. They're doing that with they did that with the Gran Turismo movie. They're gonna do that with Horizon and God of War. They already announced that they're doing series and slash films for that. They did it with Uncharted. What else?
They're doing a Gravity Rush
Patapon.
movie and a
Yeah,
Patapon movie as
Patapon and
well.
Gravity Rush are also getting films or some sort of TV adaptations. It's like
Yeah.
they're choosing to take their gaming properties and branch them out into other things that will also see success, which isn't a bad thing. Will they see games though? It's kind of the question afterwards, because that's what the people that were into those series care about. They're not necessarily going to care for an adaptation. They might. A lot of people actually might. That's actually not true. But
this is the thing with that. I don't think these projects are made for those sorts of people. I think this is like Sony's attempt at doing that blue ocean strategy, where they want to try and appeal to not their core demographic and use leverage their IP to get more people in. Because a lot of people who watched The Last of Us and really enjoyed it were people who never played the game.
Yes.
And didn't own a PlayStation. And I think that's the sort of idea, and I think it's a solid idea. But it does seem really bizarre to do that while also just not having any games to then back these up in, like, it's cool to make a Gravity Rush movie and get the Gravity Rush IP out there, but like, are you going to do anything with it afterwards? Like, are you hoping that enough people will like the Gravity Rush movie that you'll justify making a Gravity Rush game after the fact?
Right. And also, just because you do a Gravity Rush
as well.
Yeah, just because you do a Gravity Rush for Patapon film or series doesn't mean it'll do well. It could flop. It could do poorly, and then you won't see any return into the games, because also you didn't even put out any games for them anyways.
Like the Ratchet and Clank movie didn't do particularly well, but they actually at least released a game alongside that. Right. It's weird. It's a very bizarre situation that Sony has found itself in.
We've got 13 minutes before you have to leave.
I was gonna say,
so let's
before,
move on to
before
Nintendo
I at least
so you
have
can
to
actually
leave.
say anything on it.
Yes. So Switch 2. So the only thing that's come out about that is that for ages it was rumored to be this year, but now as of like the start of this week, it seems like people are hearing it's going to be Q1 2025 instead, which has obviously gotten loads of people doom posting. And I really think it's kind of unwarranted. Like, it does suck, obviously, that we're waiting even longer for the Switch 2 to come out.
Right.
This delay is surprisingly similar to what happened with the Switch 1, where it was also originally meant to come out in Q4 of 2016, and then was pushed back to Q1 of 2017, for seemingly the same reason, to make sure that the first-party lineup for the Switch 2 is also the Switch 1 was strong, and they want the lineup for the Switch 2 to also be just as strong. And if it means that the first year of the Switch 2 is going to be a repeat of 2017, I think they've got the right idea in mind for doing that. There's a lot, obviously, about the Switch 2 that we just don't really know. The Switch was such a big departure from the Wii U that it made things exciting. If the Switch 2 is kind of just a stronger version of the Switch 1, will Nintendo be able to sell that? Like, obviously, that's going to be their big concern. But we won't know until we at least see the Switch 2, which a lot of people were hoping we would get that it revealed in March. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. If they're not planning to release it until the end of Q1 of 20 of the next annual report quarter, because it obviously wouldn't make a massive splash on their total earnings. It'll be mainly things for the next annual report. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with there. But what I kind of want to say is I've seen people like posting that this year's going to be a terrible one. And I really don't think it is. Comparatively, like 20 this year is very similar to last year in where we stand right now. I talked about it. People who were in Discord the other day in the Leaks and Rumors channel will know I sort of wrote about this. But we're only like a whole bunch of DLC and one game behind where we were last year. There's a game coming out in March. We know that this Paper Mario doesn't have a release date, but is likely to be spring, May or April. Luigi's Mansion is currently set for summer, but that's which was 3 games we know about. And last year that was the same situation with Tears of the Kingdom, Bayonetta instead of Peach, Tears of the Kingdom instead of Paper Mario, Pikmin 4 instead of Luigi's Mansion. And then Advance Wars at some point, and I guess at Metroid Prime 4 at some point this year as well. So we're in a very similar situation, and similar to last year, February didn't really announce anything new. We didn't get anything for Nintendo's second half of the year until June. I think we'll get at least one thing in April-y time, because Nintendo doesn't have any... They sort of coasted along their DLC for Fire Emblem, Xenoblade, and Mario Kart during those gaps, whereas they don't have any of that this time around. Especially with the Splatoon DLC about to drop. But I do think they can very easily just announce at least one game for April, like through a Twitter drop, and give us an NSO update as well, and not have to do a direct for that and save everything till June. And the second half of this year will just be then probably not as strong as last year, but that's to be expected from the end of a console life cycle. But I feel like they've probably still... Nintendo likes to sit on stuff, and I feel like they're probably sitting on enough where we'll be fine this year for Switch. Metroid Prime 4 is going to be the big one for them. But we're probably going to have a Mario spin-off. We're probably going to have a Kirby spin-off. It feels time for both of them. Like, Endcube hasn't released any... I mean, they technically released Everybody 1-2 Switch last year, but that game was also kind of finished way earlier and was just in the tweaking process. Like, I could see a new Mario Party. I could see a new sports game coming out. Metroid Prime's the big one. There's rumors of Fire Emblem.
Pokemon Days in a few days.
Yeah, Pokemon Day as well. That's going to be a new Game Freak title, whether or not it's a remake, whether or not it's a Legends or Let's Go type alternate take on the series.
Okay, guys. I will sum this up in a minute. Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD ports never existed. The reason why those games are on Wii U in the first place is because the Wii U has very similar architecture to the GameCube. They are literally running the original code, almost entirely unchanged. Those games have slowdowns in the exact same areas as their GameCube originals because they did not change them. It would be a fucking giant hassle to port those to another architecture that's so different. They are better off literally just re-releasing the original GameCube games emulated.
I do think we will get Wind Waker and Twilight Princess eventually, whether it's the HD versions or just like what they did for Pikmin 1+2. Or some sort of weird in between where they've like it's basically the GameCube versions, but then they port in some of the features from the Wind Waker HD, like the fast sail, like some of those quality of life changes.
The NVIDIA Shield version is just running Twilight Princess on GameCube emulated with, I believe, widescreen patched in, and there is a toggle for the Wii U HD textures.
Yeah, see, I would like a Twilight Princess HD to look more like the Nvidia Shield one, but I'd also still like it to have like
The Nvidia Shield
hero
version
mode
only
where
has like the Nvidia Shield version only has like 6 or 7 different textures. It's all the Wii U textures.
Nah. Whatever. As long as like these versions it keep some of the quality of life features that Twilight Princess HD and Wind Waker HD introduced, like the fast sail or like the hero mode in Twilight Princess HD giving you the Wii version of the map, or even just not making that a hero mode, letting people choose, having motion controls on Twilight Princess as well as GameCube controls like they did for Pikmin. Like if they keep stuff like that, I think it's fine, whatever version they release of those two games. I can see it happening eventually, but whether or not it's Switch 1 or Switch 2, who knows. Metroid Prime 2 and 3 and Luigi's Mansion are the ones that I'm banking on actually existing and coming over.
Yeah.
But I mean, alright, so I've seen this being thrown around with Prime 4. Like, I don't think Nintendo needs to have a game that sells 50 bajillion units this year. Like, that's the other thing I've seen people doing posting about that Switch 2, that this year's going to be a write-off for Nintendo. Like, they're not going to have any major hitters. But I think, like, as far as Nintendo's concerned, as long as the game makes enough money to make a profit, it was a success. And in the case of Metroid Prime 4, I think this is a game that they've put so much time into that they want it to do really well. So they're going to make it their big game this year. And no, it will sell more like Pikmin 4 numbers, rather than 2D Mario numbers or Legend of Zelda numbers. But Pikmin 4 was a massive success for Nintendo as far as they're concerned. So if Prime 4 does anything like that, then it's like great. Like Metroid Dread was a big success for them as well, and was like a big game and was one of the big games of that year for them. So I don't know why people think Prime 4 wouldn't be their flagpole title this year. I don't think they have to have some sort of Tears of the Kingdom level release every single year.
I would say Prime 4 might be the one that you kind of would want more eyes on at this point already, though, like with marketing, because it's been a long time. Some people might not. The general public might have completely forgotten that. Oh yeah, they announced that.
Yeah, well, that's what I think. I think that's going to be their big focus for this year. Prime 4 coming out in like September or October. Marketing starts for it soon, with Prime 2 being dropped and Prime 3 dropping at some point, maybe even both of them together in a Pikmin 1+2 style way. And then building up to just like Prime 4 and trying to make that the big thing, and that's where we're going to see all the marketing push. And then we'll have Fire Emblem, which again, Fire Emblem also doesn't sell like massive amounts, and I think Fire Emblem Remake will probably sell less than Engage did, because I think even though that game is a remake of the title that supposedly has the best story and is the game that like the Three Houses devs took inspiration from and based a lot of Three Houses on, so Genealogy of the Holy War should really be lined up to be a big game for the Fire Emblem series. I feel like it just won't.
No, I feel like it's gonna be bigger than Engage, actually.
You think?
That game came out and disappeared.
Yeah, but I don't see people like point to its story being sort of, kind of a nothing burger happening in Engage, and like Genealogy has that like a bit different. Like it's got a much better story for starters, a much more engaged story. But I also think that Genealogy, I also think a big reason why Engage didn't sell as well as something like Three Houses is because it's the second Fire Emblem game on the system. I think there are probably plenty of people who picked up Three Houses and still play Three Houses, and so don't really have a particular reason to play another Fire Emblem game and get invested in that.
What?
And especially given the fact that Genealogy is going to be the first Fire Emblem game they release since New Mystery of the Emblem on the DS that will be in the traditional Fire Emblem style. Given that Gaiden... Well, because, like, Fire Emblem Echo Shadows of Valentia was a game with the whole map and the ability to walk around and grind and stuff, because it's the game that Sacred Stones then took from, and then Awakening then took that idea from. And every game since that point has had let you do features like that. Like Three Houses does it through menus rather than a world map, but it still lets you do skirmishes and get trained and battle up and stuff like that. But Genealogy of the Holy War is a traditionally linear Fire Emblem game. That's
Doesn't have to
chapter
be.
by chapter. You're right, it doesn't have to be, but I don't see how they could like remake it to make it an open map, open sort of world, and still have it also function the same way as it did.
I think the important thing here is the reason Engage doesn't have legs is because discussion on it didn't happen. Genealogy is deliberately, like, not deliberately, it is inherently controversial in its story to the point where there will be people talking about it, even if it's, like, not the most positive.
People will talk about it, but I don't think that's a sole reason for why Three Houses did better than Engage and vice versa.
Well,
I think I think it being the third Fire Emblem game on the Switch, and one that's going to come out so close to the Switch 2's launch, is going to kneecap Genealogy's sales as well. Like, maybe it won't do worse than Engage, but I don't think it will do much better than Engage either. Like,
that's fair enough.
Also did have more eyes on it as well, like with the way that they marketed it. It was at E3, and then also had a few directs had its own direct.
Three Houses came out at a better time as well to release than Engage did.
Engage was announced and then like released 7 months later?
Yeah, and it was released like January, which is never a great month unless you're Pokemon and you can get away with it.
Do you have to go now? Do you have any finishing thoughts?
Yes, I'm gonna have to go. So yeah, my thoughts for Nintendo and this year is that it's a shame that the Switch 2 has been delayed to 2025. But I don't think Nintendo's just gonna. We're not getting a repeat of 2016 where Nintendo barely released anything, and like Paper Mario Color Splash was their big game for the year, and then that was it, and then we were silent for like 3 months. I think this year's going to be very similar in releases to last year. Just instead of having games like Tears of the Kingdom and Pikmin 4 and Mario Wonder, they're gonna be games like Metroid Prime 4 and Fire Emblem Genealogy, and Pokemon will probably be the biggest thing they release this year. Whether or not that's Black and White 3 or Legends Unova or something Let's Go Johto. Like that's going to be Nintendo's big title because it's Pokemon. But like we'll still get smaller releases. Just because we didn't get a general direct this month like we usually do, doesn't mean that Nintendo has nothing to release, and people just need to stop being upset about it, I guess. and just think on the positive side that if they are gearing up for a repeat of the Switch 1's release, just replacing Breath of the Wild with the next 3D Mario, next year is going to be incredible for Nintendo. Get a new Xenoblade, we'll get a 2D Zelda, we'll get Mario Kart, Animal Crossing maybe, who knows.
We'll get unicorns and rainbows.
Yeah, it's going to be great. But okay, I've had my 10-minute spiel. I'll leave it up to you two guys to discuss. Thanks everyone. I'm gonna go and dip.
Alright. Have a good one.
Who was that guy?
Finally, we can take over. Okay.
So Nintendo Switch, huh?
The Nintendo Switch 2. I think I said either on the last podcast or the one before that I really hope it's actually just called the Nintendo Switch 2.
No.
That is the most effective way to communicate that it is a new system and not just an upgrade like a PlayStation 4 Pro or a Wii U. I know what I just said. That's what the population thought.
I feel like a PS4 Pro is pretty direct.
No, what I mean is a PS4 Pro is direct about it being just a PlayStation 4 but slightly better. A
Yeah.
Super Switch or a
Super Switch.
or something like that does not communicate that it's the new Switch. It communicates that it is a Switch.
Yes. Well, yeah.
But yeah,
I guess that would just depend on now what is Nintendo intending to do with it. What if it isn't like everything that all the rumors are making it sound like it will be? If that ends up being the case,
that's
then
impossible.
they might just call it a Super Switch. It definitely is the percent of that happening is like very slim to none. But slim to none doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. It's just less likely to happen.
That alright, buddy, if you want to go with your non-zero chance, you can certainly do that, but that's semantics.
Yes.
The thing is, we've seen the current Switch just like basically plateau in terms of what games can do on it. We literally had a game come out last year that was just a version of a game from the launch of the system. It was beat for beat the same game, but with slightly more bells and whistles.
You talking about Tears of the Kingdom?
I'm talking about Tears of the Kingdom.
I cannot have any comment on that because I own it, but I haven't yet played it. And I don't know if many other people would also agree with you. So I can't.
It is the same game, but there are two overworlds that have 20-second long loading screens. Very impressive. But regardless of that, like, there is a point that they've hit now where games can't be easily ported to the Switch, and that was already the case at the beginning of the Switch, where third-party games made for other platforms are so difficult to get on that hardware that is barely keeping step with last generation's hardware. Luckily, Microsoft shot themselves in the foot enough to give Nintendo their own foot in the race, which is to say that because third parties are being forced to have their games work on the Xbox Series S system, which sucks and is a bad piece of hardware, the Switch 2 can be less powerful than the current generation, but as long as it keeps step with that Series S, it can play most modern games with little issue.
Yeah. I for it's hard to have anything. I don't necessarily have anything to say much about Nintendo because they're doing a decent job. They're doing a very good job.
Unlike Microsoft and Sony that we talked about, all of the shit we're saying about Switch 2 is hearsay, not officially confirmed. They said the PS5 was in its later years of life, which is freaking insane.
It is. I thought they said like it's now entering its second half. I thought that's
it's in its later years now. And then Xbox is very clearly publicly trying to retire the Xbox brand as much as it can. which is
That's like a horrible idea.
those things are happening and we're seeing them happen, whereas the most we know from Switch are really credible leaks of hardware from the actual manufacturing factories where the chips for the new system are being made. Everything else is just kind of hearsay, and even that's hearsay, as credible as it might be, because who knows at this point. It's just we've reached a state where games are still coming up. There are many games coming out. There's Final Fantasy VII Rebirth coming this month, Dragon's Dogma 2 next month. There are many games coming out right now, but because the major three aren't really putting out that much themselves, all eyes are on them to see what they do next. And because we don't know what they're doing next, or they have shown bad signs that what they're doing next is not good, it's this state of uneasiness about the future of the console industry, which is why we're here to begin with. We've reached this yeah, we reached this state of uneasiness and uncertainty, where all we can do is think about how bad it's going to be, because the idea that it is going to be good feels like a long ways away from now.
Even in the case of where, well, right now, I mean, like in a Switch's life, even in the case where there's something that we don't like that happens, it is not as dreadful or bad in comparison to what's happening with like PlayStation and Xbox, or like mind-bogglingly confusing.
Yeah.
For Switch right now, it's kind of like, okay, there are some games that are releasing, and even with the games that are releasing this year, there are people that are excited about them. There are people that are very excited, especially with the Thousand Year Door remake. There are people that are incredibly happy about that. Princess Peach Showtime, it's not gonna be. There's not as excitement that I see about it, but the talk that I see about it is people that are interested in it.
Yeah.
Splatoon 2's DLC is gonna come out. I mean, Splatoon 3's DLC is about to come out. Of course, people are gonna play that. People really love Splatoon. What is it? Oh, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is coming out. I see that's the one game where I haven't heard people talk about it, but I haven't heard anything bad about it either.
Yeah, the only thing we know about that is that it's a graphically enhanced version of Luigi's Mansion 2. There's nothing to talk about
more yet. So it's kind of like all Nintendo talk can be is speculation of what is to come next and what we would like to see next. Because also, like, as Pokemon Day is in a few days, we know that there are more things coming. That's kind of the thing with Nintendo right now. We know there are things that are coming.
Yeah.
And now it's just wait for the announcement of said thing to happen. Whereas for Xbox and Microsoft, for Xbox and PlayStation, it's kind of there are things that are announced. Now we're waiting for their release. Outside of, or we're waiting at least another 6 years to ever see those games. Like not Death Stranding 2, but the tactical espionage series that Kojima was to work on. Yeah, okay. Whenever that comes out. Other than that, when we're talking about the actual now consoles themselves, Switch is now doing continually very well. And even when it's not the case that you have Nintendo putting out a game, you still have third parties and indies that are also supporting it very well. For the other two platforms, it's kind of like, what are they going to show that can help push their consoles? Because that's kind of the issue that they're having right now. Whereas Nintendo just doesn't have an issue, and you have a lot more worry over there than compared to over here. There's not too much to say to Nintendo that they're doing a great job right now, and you need to keep that up with whatever the Switch 2 ends up being, because if the Switch 2 to switch the announcement of the Switch 2, whatever it ends up being, could end up being the point where we're like, oh no, what are you doing? If something goes horribly wrong, and that's only if something goes
Yeah.
horribly wrong, or something if there's a big decision that people really don't like a lack of backwards compatibility, or something like that would be like the kind of thing. It was like, oh wait a minute, now people have to question if they wouldn't necessarily want to. I mean, people would still buy it, but people now have to think about it a lot more, or weigh that a lot more, or be very critical of Nintendo a lot more. So, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's kind of
we're
where
in
it
a
is right now.
state where there's a plethora of games still coming for Nintendo. Xbox has like a handful of games coming out that they've announced, and Sony has. Anyway, with all that, like, have we fully said our piece
I
about what
think
we
I
think?
have it. Yeah.
It's a big state of uncertainty, and I said this earlier as barely a footnote, but because games keep taking so long to make, because the more years a game takes, the more it costs, games are starting to become so expensive to make that it's becoming unsustainable. I do see the Western industry collapsing very soon. There were massive amounts of layoffs last year, and already so many in just the 2 months that we've had. Not even 2 months, we're only halfway through February, at like barely halfway through. It's insane how awful the industry is right now, actually.
Yeah,
uh
it's
I
pretty fucking rough.
There were some people who were complaining that people were being like too negative, and that, oh no, everything's fine. Um yeah, okay, fucking capital G gamer. The video games coming out might still be fine, but the people making them are in a bad state right now.
At the same time, as bad as the state the game industry is right now, with the massive amount of layoffs, the massive amount of, like, how we heard out of Bandai Namco failed projects because of ventures that they decided to take that ended up not working out well for them. At the same
Huh?
time, what?
What? Why did you say Bandai Namco?
Oh, because they announced some stuff recently. Did you not see that?
I didn't. I didn't. I'm aware of
Oh,
Embracer canceling 30 projects within the last 6 months.
yeah, you have a lot of companies taking ventures that end up not being really good for them. Bandai Namco is one of those companies off the top of my head that I could think of.
Oh my god.
Yeah, they Blue Protocol isn't doing so well, which hasn't released yet in America, and they said that they canceled five unannounced projects that they were working on. Tekken 8 sold 2 million, which is good, but it's like, but it seems like other avenues are not doing as well, as they would like them to do. Yeah, like you just said, Embracer Group, oh yeah, um, doing very not great.
I
Um,
still love how our original podcast talking about Embracer, um,
Embracer.
they we like title it $300 million for Gex, and that was the only IP they didn't fucking take.
Good
And
on
I'm
them
so
though.
happy that they didn't, because we
Yeah.
get a new Gex collection.
Yeah. That's actually the
Oh.
funny thing that happened out of that. It was like, oh, you didn't take that? Okay, we'll do something with it. Surprisingly, I was like, oh shit, okay. Yeah, there's a lot of bad things going on in the game industry. At the same time,
Oh my god, one day
it
ago, Bandai Namco reveals it canceled at least 5 in
yeah,
development games.
yeah.
Ooh.
Even though the game industry is such a dire state, you kind of, when people have lost their jobs, when people are, seeing a lot of failure, you you don't want to constantly loom the fact that there is doom and gloom over their heads, because that is going to make people feel way even worse than they already do. The last point where people want to be that are already suffering is thinking about how much they're suffering. They should acknowledge it, and they need to make corrections for
What?
that. And in terms of the game industry like itself, yeah, they need to make the corrections. In terms of the people that are working, they need to be supported. Those people need to be sort of to actually, be given like, not is it, I guess, would leg up be the right term? A leg up, to that way they can have some either somewhere else to go that can treat them well, or so either you have things like independent as well, but something that can provide them that a new source of support for themselves, or in addition to like some sort of enjoyment. And of course, I
What
don't want
the
to say video games,
fuck are you
because
talking about?
what do you
Jesse,
think? What do you
what the
think I'm
fuck are
talking
you
about?
talking about?
Who? Huh?
Uh,
Wait,
dude,
who are you talking to?
I've been talking to you.
Oh, what's wrong? What's wrong with what I'm saying?
It feels weird because, like, I don't know if I'm reading you wrong, but you were saying, like, there's no point to be negative because it's just gonna make the people who are down feel worse, but that's just kind of ignoring the issue.
No, that's not ignoring the issue. You can acknowledge the issue. That's like I literally said, hey, don't ignore the issue. You acknowledge the issue. Acknowledge that these bad things happening. That's why you have to give support to these people. Giving support to these people is directly acknowledging the issue. Positively giving support is acknowledging the issue. But but rather than being like saying that there's a lot of bad things happening, to just only state that is what I'm saying would be like, or say like how bad it is, would kind of, and not doing saying more, doing more would be the issue. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the only way to get things to change is to put these companies on the coals, because that's pretty much most of that's all like regular consumers like us can do right now. Highlight what the companies are doing wrong, call
Yeah.
them out for it, uh just don't let them brush their multiple transgressions under the rug. Um, it's the most we can do, and it's what we should do.
Yeah.
But yeah, the industry's not going to
Yeah.
collapse. But there is going to be a huge downturn in terms of just, we were already seeing it happening. Sustainability is not possible right now. And the only way to move forward from this is for companies to stop making these huge inflated games that take so long to make, that cost so many man hours and require so many human rights violations to make, that there's no reason for people to be in this industry unless they really want to make those games.
Yeah. I've had some friends that are like, I'm fine with backing out. I'm leaving the industry. So it's like
Yeah.
it's rough to see happen in real time. But also that those same friends are now choosing to do something else with their time. And it's like that's good that you're able to
Yeah.
get out of this
I
in a
personally
decent way.
have
But
made
yeah, I
it
recommend
clear that I wanted to be a game developer. You can see echoes of that at the start of this channel. I am pretty much given up on that, to be honest. It just doesn't feel like a good situation to put myself in anymore. And it feels like there's no point, which sucks so much because of the gamers are really entitled. They say a lot of things that are really, really ridiculous about video games. Like, the demands they make for games are causing this huge inflation of expectations and causing companies to have to try to chase these things which are completely unrealistic to even remotely accomplish. No matter what. It's just it feels like this is the end of a natural progression of events, of constantly ballooning expectations based on hype marketing and unrealistic demos that companies have made for their games, and trying to reach those expectations that they set by publicly releasing these demos that are meant to be like proof of concept, and having to reach the level of fidelity in these demos that were never meant to be playable. It's just ridiculous. I feel like I'm talking in circles, but hopefully I'm making somewhat sense.
I think it makes sense. I think I will say on the question though, how, because I am a Nintendo fan, outside of that and PC, um, I personally don't feel like I have too much of the experience of being listened to with the specific thing that I would like. And also within the circles that I'm in, I generally hear a lot of criticism towards um like publishers and game developers.
Yeah.
In regards to certain decisions, like for instance, in regards to PlayStation, the way that a lot of people, a lot of my friends feel really dislike the sort of homogenizing is not the right word, but kind of in the sense
homogenization of the titles that are associated with that company.
Actually, more like in the way that those games are being made or presented, kind of like was it like the theatricalizing of like God of War, where like everything has to be like a one-shot type of thing.
Yeah,
things like that. I've heard a lot of criticisms from my friends regards to things like that. Whereas I'm not completely aware of how much is it that I'm not in tune with the demands of what other gamers are asking for, especially those of Microsoft and PlayStation fans. Because in regards to PlayStation I already hear a lot of criticisms. But in regards to Xbox and Microsoft, there's criticism in regards to the decisions that they're making in terms of like for the future. But because most of the people that I know don't really have Xboxes, they're really just the only Xbox thing that they're really interested in is just Game Pass. I don't know what the casual demands are, like what is the reach or the height of the demands that other people are asking for. I'm not in tune with that really.
Okay, so here's an example that you may be familiar with, but you might not be. You ever heard of this little series called The Legend of Zelda?
Yeah, what about it? That's Nintendo though.
Yes, but here's the time where there were extreme expectations set for a Nintendo series that had to be met, that caused extreme ballooning of the amount of resources that needed to be put into the development of a project to the point where it has become unsustainable and they couldn't do it again.
Are you talking about Breath of the Wild?
I'm talking about Breath of the Wild.
Okay. Yeah, but I get that, but I'm talking about like those other companies.
Yeah.
because I can understand in much sense, not understand, but I'm very knowledgeable on the Nintendo stuff, or at least directions of the Nintendo stuff, because I am very much more of a Nintendo fan. I'm really specifically asking about PlayStation and Xbox because those are the
Yeah.
ones that I don't hear. But I
Well,
mean, we're
yes.
in the Discord server, of course, we're gonna hear way more about Nintendo stuff, but we don't hear as much stuff about
Yeah,
PlayStation and Xbox.
we're in a situation where we're in a community focused on Nintendo. A lot of
Yeah.
us have the perspective of Nintendo fans. Um, in terms of Xbox and PlayStation, people want better graphics, bigger worlds, more cutscenes, more cinematic experiences, and that checklist of expectations is the expensive checklist of expectations. That is what is causing all of these games to become so expensive to make, and the expectation that all of these things are flawless, they're excellent, no cracks in the seams whatsoever, is not possible to reach.
Yeah. Um. Oh, I missed. So I at this point I don't really have anything else to say about this stuff.
Okay.
I feel like we got what we could say.
Yeah.
I missed the whole what did you guys play part. So what have you been playing recently?
I was playing Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth.
What's your thoughts about that on that now? Because I did see some of your thoughts on Twitter.
I am mixed.
Mm,
I voiced that I like the Kiryu half and I don't like the Ichiban half.
gotcha.
That's how I feel. I don't want to waste anyone's time with it on that. Because I talked for like 20 minutes before about it.
Have you finished it already, or?
I finished it.
So that's where you're at now. At this
It
point.
was
Okay.
so
What's your
long.
thoughts on
It
that
was
game?
so
Okay.
long.
Were you already feeling that way in regards to Yakuza 7? In regards to not
No,
being too keen on Ichiban, or?
I enjoyed Ichiban a lot in 7. He doesn't feel like the same character in 8, and also his quest in 8 is utterly pointless and feels unimportant.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I was curious.
Okay. Thanks everybody for watching. I need to address this really quick. We've been hit with a shit ton of false copyright claims on specifically the music in our videos. So we are having some issues with that. If y'all could support us on Patreon, or just toss a super chat or two our way, that would help us make more money than we make on ads, considering
Yep.
the last stream there was a Dire Docs copyright claim, not for Dire Docs, which isn't in the YouTube copyright system, but for Dire Docs lo-fi hip-hop remix.
Are you serious?
Yes.
What? That's a. Oh, gosh, YouTube. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of false copyright claims, especially when people barely change a song and then put it into the system. There was that awful one last month where somebody literally just put the menu theme from Smash Ultimate into the system, and if you aren't a YouTube partner or you don't try to contact YouTube on their various social media platforms, they will just steamroll you and say your dispute is wrong.
Yeah. Or they just won't respond at all.
Yeah.
In addition to the Patreon stuff as well, we're planning to have more of our coming reviews as we're working on them, like before like full release, to be there first. So for instance, I'm currently working on the full Pokemon Violet review right now, as in we're including both the DLC, the epilogue, and in addition to like a re-review with my further thoughts on the main game, since the last review of it was around this time last year. So if you want to see the entire script for that's already written, then if you join the Patreon, you should be able to. I believe Nanton already put on. We talked about it, but if it's not there, then we'll basically get it on there. So that way, if you support the Patreon, then you have access to it. But before it publicly releases. In addition, we're also trying to, in between stuff, get out smaller videos. So if you didn't see it, we released a Go Mecha Ball, like I called it a micro. I don't know what I actually call it going forward, but like an SG micro, where it's just like a small thoughts on Go Mecha Ball. And I'm working on another video just like that for a game called Bat Boy that we got last year. And it's pretty fun. We are indeed working on stuff. It's just taking a bit of time to.
It would be very funny if I used the 5 minutes of footage that I have of Infinite Wealth from Ozzy saying shadow play that whenever I get hit by a car to make a 60-second review of Infinite Wealth where they just keep getting hit by cars.
Yeah, if you could be like, for the Kiryu part, like all this stuff, and then for the Ichiban part, as him getting hit by a car. And then it's like, I didn't like this.
Oh, God. But yeah, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for joining us. We'll be back next week with a roster stream.
Oh, okay, that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, which did we which
Fire Emblem
Are we allowed to say? Damn.
The poll results are public.
I haven't checked. I voted and then I went away from it. I voted for Pokken. I would really like a new Pokken game, so I'm kind of like, oh, let's do a Pokken one. I was thinking of joining on that. I was like, hell yeah, I'll join it up for a Pokemon. That'd be funny.
All right.
I don't know Fire Emblem as much, but I'll still watch.
Thank you all for joining us. Please support us on Patreon if you can, or just toss a couple of dollars our way. It really helps. We're not doing too great on ads right now. I don't know if you guys heard, but most people on YouTube aren't doing great for ads right now, and I don't know why. We don't know why. It's
start of the year.
Perilous. It's a very perilous situation. As always, thank you to our patrons on screen right now. We love all of you. Shout outs to Lisbon Mapping, and always remember to return to the source.